So a couple people have direct messaged me that I haven't been putting recipe videos up as of late, but it's just been because I'm busy. So I thought I'd show you really quick how I make my spaghetti sauce. For spaghetti, it's pretty easy. It's from scratch, not totally from scratch because I don't start with tomatoes, but I do start with unflavored paste and sauce and diced tomatoes and whatnot. So I'll show you how I basically make my sauce, flavoring it from the base up, and it's pretty easy. It should be done in like 30 minutes, and then you can add whatever kind of pasta you want to it. So I'm using my Dutch oven initially, and I'm going to add, I've got my olive oil heated up in here, and I'm going to add some onions. So the whole sauce is going to be built around the onions and ground turkey. I'm going to use ground turkey in my sauce because I think it adds flavor, but you really could use any type of ground meat that you like. So I pre-chopped my onion, and I really just season my spaghetti sauce with a few basic seasonings, and I tend to over season it at this stage so that the seasoning is kind of built from the base up, like I was saying earlier. So I'm gonna kind of heavily salt this. To me, the perfect sauce is a balance of textures and flavors. So you don't want it to be too thick, and you don't want it to be too runny. So I usually, after I've got my onions sauteed and nice and soft, I'm going to do a touch of crushed red pepper, just a tiny bit. I'll add some meat into it, and then I'll add in my tomato paste, and it'll be really thick at that point, and then I'll add in some sauces and some diced tomatoes, including the juice, and some crushed tomatoes until it's the right texture. So to this, I've added my onions, I've added salt, pepper, a little crushed red pepper, and then I'm adding some parsley, dried parsley, and of course I'm also going to add some minced garlic and some basil. I almost feel like you can't really add too much garlic. It's pretty forgiving because it's not a super strong flavor. I guess it depends on how much you like garlic. But along with the sauce having a nice texture, you also want it to have a nice flavor. Tomatoes tend to be very acidy, and they also are a little bit sweet. So as I flavor my sauce, I'm going to kind of take that into account. In my opinion, a really good spaghetti sauce is a little bit tangy and a little bit sweet, but not too overpowering in the tanginess and not too overpowering in the sweetness. So of course that's going to be to the taste of each individual. I don't really measure out any seasonings. I just kind of taste it as I go along. So I've kind of heavily seasoned this at this point, and then I'll taste it once I add more of the tomato into it and see how it tastes, and then we'll know what other seasonings to add. So I'm just going to kind of let this simmer and let the onions caramelize and get really soft so they're not crunchy. So now my onions have caramelized nicely. You can see they're a lot softer. I'm just going to add a little bit of white wine at this point to kind of deglaze the pan a little bit and for flavor. Now that the onions are nice and soft, I'm going to add in my ground turkey. And kind of just break this up. So this is going to add a lot of flavor, a lot more flavor than if it's just vegetable based without meat. So I'm just going to ground this down into smaller pieces and continue to cook it. So I'm just going to season this a little bit more, and then at this point I'm going to add the tomato paste. So the meat's not completely cooked, but it doesn't matter because it's going to continue to simmer as you add your different sauces. tomato paste in and of itself is pretty bland, so that's why I don't mind over seasoning at the beginning, because there's no flavor in this other than the tomato flavor. So we're probably going to have to add some more seasonings as we go along. But at that point, it'll be to taste. So I'm turning down my heat a little bit to kind of let this simmer some and the flavors to kind of permeate through. But you can see this is pretty thick from the paste, which is fine. That's exactly what I want. The juice from the turkey is kind of thinning it out a little bit, which is also nice. So like I mentioned earlier, it's just a balance of flavor and textures. But this is pretty thick and fluffy, which is the stage I want to be at this point. The next thing I'm going to add to this is the diced tomatoes. And I'm going to add those along with all the juice. But this gives a nice bit of texture. So it's not just homogeneous. Makes it more interesting. And you can see this is kind of thinning it out some too. But this is pretty easy. It's a pretty easy way to kind of make your own tomato sauce or spaghetti sauce from scratch, or kind of from scratch. So I have my heat turned down to medium. My face is kind of cut off, but the main thing I want you to see is the dish. So you can see at this point, this was the sauteed onions that got really soft with all the seasonings, the salt, pepper, garlic, parsley, and basil, and a little bit of crushed red pepper. And then to that, we added the ground turkey, and then we added 3 cans of tomato paste. Those 3 8-ounce cans of tomato paste, and then 2 8-ounce cans of diced tomatoes with the juice. And you can see the texture that it is. It still is too thick. This is the sauce that I use basically for any red sauce dish that I make. Stuffed shells, spaghetti. You can add like any type of noodle you want to this. It's very versatile. Now I'm going to continue to add thinner tomato sauce products. So this is tomato sauce to get it to the consistency that I eyeball and think that looks good. And I'm sure once I taste this, I'm going to have to add some more of one of those 6 seasonings or so that I added. I'm definitely going to add sugar once I've added all of the tomato based products. When it's the right texture, at that point is when I'll add the sugar to taste, so that the sauce doesn't taste too tangy or acidic. But you can see the texture is getting more to what I think is ideal for spaghetti. So I'll add another can of tomato sauce. That makes for 2 cans of tomato sauce, and these are big cans, 29 ounce cans. And then the last, I still think it's a little bit too thick for my personal taste. So I'm gonna add a can of crushed tomatoes. And you definitely want to wear an apron or whatever when you're doing this, because if you've worked with tomato sauces, you know how much it splatters. But I think this is about the consistency that I like. And I'm just going to stir this all through until it's evenly mixed. All right, so I completely stirred this through. I think this texture is perfect. It's not too thick and it's not too thin. So now I just have to taste it and see which flavors we're lacking. And then I'm also going to add some sugar. It's actually pretty good, but a little too tangy. But that's what I'd expect because we haven't added sugar yet to it. Remember, we used 3 8-ounce cans of tomato paste, and that's pretty concentrated tomato flavor. So it looks like a lot of sugar that I'm adding, but it really does help to balance out the flavor. So I'm just gonna taste it again, and this is a fresh spoon because that's gross if I double dip. That's much better. I'll probably add a little bit more sugar. And then what I'm gonna do is just let this simmer for like 30 minutes. I'm gonna turn the heat down lower, let it simmer for like 30 minutes. All the flavors will kind of unlock and permeate through, and then it'll be done. And you can put it on whatever you want. Is it, nephew?
It's good.
Mommy, can you
Really
give
good.
us some cheese?
You like it?
Yeah, thank you.